Welcome to the Five Heart Podcast, the best Nebraska podcast in the land. I, John Johnston, am your fearless leader, founder, Core Nation, and hosting this podcast tonight because Todd and Greg are sloughing off, so you get to deal with my lousy intros of this thing compared to Greg's radio voice. Tonight, I am joined by Husker Mike, who writes the best opponent previews in the land. And we're going to talk about Big Ten media rights. How you doing, Mike?
Pretty good, pretty good.
So you do write the best opponent previews. You know that?
Every so often people tell me that or whatever else. It's like, a lot of people, I usually try to do a little bit deeper dive than what a lot of other people do, so it's just try to get a little bit deeper than everybody else. It takes a little bit longer. I know I've seen people that crank these things out, do one a day. It's like, well, okay, I guess you have a full-time job, but even then it's like you're just doing superficial,
right
stuff here. So
I think most people are just looking for the clicks from the headline.
Yeah.
But we're not Big Ten media days are only like a month away.
I know. And like with the early or late August game, the second attempt at going to Ireland, the summer's even shorter than than usual. So
we are it's not too far. It's that last mile before you get home.
Yeah. So
it's the long trip, and then you're like, oh my God. So Big Ten media rights. Before we started, I went out and I pulled up one article about this. And the article is by Dennis Dodd at CBS Sports, who, quite frankly, I'm not a big Dennis Dodd fan. That guy's we'll stay away from that.
He's a great
guy. But he says in his article, the New Deal, which would begin in 2023, which is not far away either, could be worth a record-setting $1 billion per season.
You have to use that Dr. Evil 1 billion.
I was trying to remember it, but I mean that's really $1 billion a year.
When you think about what Fox, another network, is going to do. And keep in mind that unlike all the other conferences, the Big Ten gets a double tap on what they have the media rights that they sell to BTN, which is owned by Fox and the Big Ten, but because they actually own part of the Big Ten network, they get whatever else the BTN also generates as far as profitability. So they get a double dip, if you will. That's something that the SEC and ACC aren't able to do. The Pac-12 could, but nobody watches the Pac-12 network. So
no, they don't. Boy, Jim Delaney was a genius. Setting up BTN, and everybody thought he was an idiot at the time.
Well, I think the Big Ten was in a unique position where they have these incredible brands that people just can't resist. The SEC probably could have done the same thing with their media rights, but they chose to go tie into the ESPN monster there, and so they are fully committed there, but the idea of a conference network was ahead of its time, and certainly I would say BTN is more successful than all the other networks that people have tried to do. I would argue in both college and pro, because I don't think this is just my perspective. I don't think NFL Network and MLB and NBA TV are nearly as ingrained as BTN is to Big Ten college sports.
Do you think that's because this is a little off topic, and this is where we start going really long. But do you think that's because the Big Ten probably more than any other conference, maybe the Pac-12 a little bit, but they've emphasized Olympic sports, and people are. I mean, like Nebraska, everybody will watch Big Ten volleyball. You have an entire Big Ten wrestling is the top wrestling conference. It's not even close. Big Ten volleyball, top volleyball. I mean, all those sports add up to viewership and money, don't they?
It becomes a big host it's your primary host for Big Ten basketball. I mean,
that's true.
Honestly, basketball, ESPN doesn't have nobody has the bandwidth. BTN can show Big Ten basketball 7 days a week, and whatever else. But I think it's some of that. I think it's also, with the SEC, I would joke that it's pretty much football, and then
they have baseball
practice start, and then I guess we'll a couple baseball games, and then what are preseason footballs? SEC is so predominantly football oriented, and all the best football games end up on other networks. But the Big Ten has, like you said, basketball, baseball's growing thanks to Nebraska coming over. I mean, we cannot underestimate what Nebraska did for Big Ten baseball.
True.
Wrestling, as you mentioned. Let's not forget hockey.
Right.
Probably the second best college hockey conference around, and some of the most passionate fan bases in college hockey. So you got that. So you have all these premier volleyball conference. You have all these great things that drive viewership towards BTN.
So first, let's start out with when you look at this. You mentioned that the SEC's tied primarily to ESPN. Now, there's a thing like first tier, second tier, third tier rights. Can you explain that to me and our listeners? We're five.
That whole tier structure is going away with the SEC, but it's going to I think it's going to be enhanced or increased with what the Big Ten does. To think about this in the best perspective, I'll use the SEC example. For the longest while, the top SEC game went on CBS, 2:30 on Saturday afternoon.
Right.
That was tier one rights. Tier two rights was what ESPN has had the last 20 years or whatever. So they get 2 or 3 SEC games, and they, put one on ESPN and one on ESPN2, 2 or 3 games, maybe 4. I don't know the exact math on there. And that was the tier 2 rights. And then there was the tier 3 rights, which kind of fell into, you may have seen things like Jefferson Pilot and things like that. Though, sometimes those games were syndicated or whatever else. And those were the tier 3 rights. Those are the games that SEC didn't have the bandwidth or the interest in, because, even though SEC has, ESPN has, ESPN, the Deuce, ESPNU, ESPN News, they never actually made it quite to ESPN the Ocho. But so they don't have all that bandwidth there. So that's where the tier 3 rights came in. So then SEC saw how much of a success the Big Ten was having with BTN. They said, we need a conference network too. So they created the SEC ESPN network. That's their tier 3 rights.
Okay.
Get that. Now where the SEC is going, well, ESPN made a big deal to because they already had the tier 3 rights, they already had the tier 2 rights. So then they said, we want all of it. So they outbid CBS, and so ESPN now has all the rights. Tier 1, tier 2, 3, it's all ESPN now.
And that sounds like eggs all in one basket.
Yep. So now when it comes to the Big Ten, you've got the tier 1, tier 2 rights a little bit nebulous there. You've got right now you got Fox and ESPN splitting up basically tier 1, tier 2 rights. There really isn't a tier 1, tier 2 with the Big Ten. Fox and ESPN split them both, and then whatever doesn't fit those things falls to tier 3, which is BTN, having the rights to that.
So how much of this last year, there was a lot of talk about the college football playoff expanding, and they wanted to do this. We're going to go to 12 teams thing. And there was a lot of crap being thrown around about, we're going to do this ahead of time before the contract is because of a test. And then the alliance was formed with the Big Ten, Pac-12 and ACC. And really the alliance was just something to throw a big monkey wrench into what really was the ESPN and SEC, it sounds like. But I think really what that wasn't that a shot at basically saying we're not giving all the rights to ESPN early, so knock it off?
I think that was the plan there when the college football player was first formed. It was kind of weird how all those rights, because they didn't really package them up in one big tight package. It's just ESPN just went out there and started negotiating with each of the 6 bowls to get the rights to each bowl game, and then said we've got all the rights to all the playoff games. I'm not sure that was the best deal for college football to do, but that's the bowls we give the bowls way too much power to manage this stuff, and so the playoff, ESPN got all the rights to all 6 of the bowl games, and they have to be involved in the playoff in some situation there. Obviously, I think if you let a Fox, maybe even a CBS, other outlets bid on it, when it's competitive bidding, people are going to tap. If ESPN kind of already had the rights to everything, so it was kind of hard for them to get pushed out of that thing. But if they have to do competitive bidding, that's how ESPN lost money, or lost Monday night, or lost the Sunday night football package, because they weren't willing to bid what NBC was willing to do. So that's So when you have that competitive bidding, and I think there were networks saying, or some of the other conferences when the idea was expanding it out, they said, well, we're already committed to ESPN. They're not going to pony up more money, so we're not going to get that big rights increase, and we're going to hand it off more stuff to ESPN to be power brokers. I would disagree with that, simply because when they were talking about this thing, you were going to have the seeds 5 through 12 playing. They were talking about on campus. That would have been those would have been amazing games to potentially make Alabama or an SEC team go up and play in the horseshoe. Or Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Imagine that, having Miami Hurricanes have to come to Lincoln to play in December.
I don't think anybody will ever allow that to happen, which is a damn shame.
Here's the thing. I think it will happen. It will have to happen if we're serious about doing playoff expansion, because there is no way you can tell plans to go to all these different neutral sites in SEC country.
Right.
It would be insane for the Big Ten to sit there and say, you know what, we would rather play a game in Pasadena than in Ann Arbor.
Right.
Why would you make your teams fly to California to do that for the first round, and then fly to another bowl game and then have your fans fly to Dallas, and then for the semifinals, fly to Atlanta, and then for the national championship game, oh, now you got to fly to New Orleans.
Right.
How many
It's just
people
dumb.
have that much? How many fans have that much money to be able to take 4 road trips? They've already found this out with the existing playoff bowls. When they are bowl games that people can drive to, ticket sales are not a problem. People come. They may get a hotel room for a night or two, but they'll spend the $200 on a ticket. They'll, if they can, get there on, well, what would have been $50 for the gas, now it's $100.
Right.
If you can drive to a bowl game, hey, that's a great weekend trip. Go for it. As soon as you tell people, as soon as you make it so that you got to make a 3-day drive, or they have to, you're going to have to fly there, and airfares, you're talking $300, $500 a person. Well, because you're traveling over the holidays. But now you just blown. The only people making money on this are the airlines. The tickets are $200. The airfare is $500.
Right. Plus, you got to find a hotel. You got to find transportation.
So it's like, everybody's making money except the bowls and whatever. So what's the best solution? If you have all these games, are you more likely to sell a $200 ticket in Ann Arbor? Are Michigan fans going to spend $200 to go to a game in Ann Arbor or Pasadena? It'll be an easy sell.
Right.
Okay, yeah, all right. You have to spend another $150 on long underwear, but in antifreeze. But
all right, back to Big Ten media rights. This is the Big Ten is kind of coming up on their contract renewal, right?
Yep. This upcoming season is the last season of the current Fox ESPN deal. And
Jim Delaney basically set that. He took a shorter deal where I think the other conferences took longer deals with theirs, didn't he?
Well, Big Ten was last to hit the market again. And then he negotiated a shorter contract with the thought process that the Big Ten would be first in line for the next round, only to have ESPN come in and already make presumptive bids on the ACC and the SEC. And you can say, well, Big 12, but Big 12 is kind of collapsing. So that's another mess entirely. So, I don't know if it was genius or just dumb luck or whatever else, but he thought that the Big Ten was coming in first. Well, Big Ten's really actually coming in last because ESPN already made long-term agreements with the SEC. So, so now they're coming in. So
do we know? I mean, at $1 billion, is it really? You think it'll get to $1 billion a year?
I don't think people are making up that number. I think that number is probably in the reasonable ballpark. But the question is how much do they want to push to get that $1 billion? For example, let's talk about, let's say Fox says, well, we'll pay you that money, but you've got to give us something you have to give us more exclusive inventory. So, hey, I want Friday night games. I also want a Thursday night game.
Right. Okay.
So the question the Big Ten has to go back and say is, how much do they want to sell? The last contract, when they added the Friday night games, schools like Rutgers and Illinois, they said, we'll take the exposure. Nobody comes to our games anyway, so who cares?
Right.
But, schools like Ohio State, Michigan, and really Nebraska as well says Friday night on our campus is a non-starter.
Right.
And Fox may push harder, says, well, if you will agree to allow us to do a weekly Friday night game, we'll pay you this much more. And the Big Ten's going to have to say, do we really are we willing to accept that? I suspect that it may come up short, but you never know.
Okay, I don't mean to be mean here, but Jim Delaney versus Kevin Warren negotiating these things. I mean, who do you trust more? That's not even a question, really, is it? I mean, I just look at this and go, can Kevin Warren actually do this? I hope to God that there's lawyers, 38,000 lawyers.
Yeah.
I don't care. Yeah. Mike Hall, one of those guys that does the desk job could negotiate better, I think.
This contract renegotiation, this next contract, is really weird because Fox is also at the table, and I'm not sure how this exactly all came about, but Fox is sitting on the other side of the table next to Kevin Warren, and right. So the execs from ESPN, the execs from the other networks are all having to pitch to Fox. So you can say, well, gee, Kevin Warren isn't Jim Delaney. Well, that's true, but keep in mind that Fox has material value gets value out of this also. So they want the highest bid also. And I think that's kind of that's probably the thing that probably saves or mitigates the lack of Jim Delaney being involved.
All right, what else do we know about this? Anything Big Ten media rights? I guess, what was it we discussed in Slack? One of the big things about ESPN being cut out of the deal was that ESPN is the network where everybody goes for their sports news, and they have a tendency to not talk about any sports that they're not making money on.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing with that's an interesting thought there, because I think it plays two ways. I think the Big Ten is arguably too big for ESPN to ignore. A lot of hockey fans say that interest in the NHL dropped when the NHL walked away from ESPN and went to NBC for 10 years. And certainly there was an argument that ESPN was ignoring the NHL, but by that same token, at that same time, NBC was showing a hell of a lot. You could on an average weeknight evening, you usually found, more often than not, you found a hockey game on one of NBC's channels. ESPN has half the rights now, and during most of the winter until after the NCAA basketball tournament, they were only showing like 2 games a month on ESPN. So it was almost like NHL went into complete hiding on. TNT had some games, and so they would show a couple games a week, but it was almost like ESPN. So I don't know if that argument really applies, that you're going to lose viewing interest, especially with Big Ten football. Big Ten football is just too big, and keep in mind that everybody knows that the Big Ten is going to be on another network, so they're not going to ignore it.
No, that's true.
It's going to be, Big Ten's too big to ignore. Where I think the big risk of cutting out ESPN is not with football, it's basketball. Because where do you watch college basketball?
ESPN.
ESPN.
Yeah.
So that's, CBS picks up basketball in January and more so in February, but that's only on weekends. And they have to fight for coverage with golf there. Fox has a handful of games, and they fill their cable network up there. But if you don't have ESPN at the table for college basketball, Big Ten basketball is going to suffer. So I think, and that's why I think why this negotiation is getting so dicey. It's not football that's really that Big Ten doesn't need ESPN for football. They need them for basketball.
Okay.
But that being said, the other networks all know how valuable Big Ten football is, and they all want a piece of it. You've got CBS, who now has nothing on Saturdays.
Does that mean we won't hear Gary Danielson at all?
Well, that's a good question. If I had to bet money right now, I think what you're going to see is, I'll go ahead and lay my cards out right now. What I think you're going to see is CBS take over what currently ABC would be normally showing. Fox and CBS will alternate who's got the big game of the week. And when I say big game, it's B1G. And you'll see I have a doubleheader. In fact, I would not be surprised. This is an idea I've kicked out of there, is that Fox's Big Noon Saturday becomes B1G Noon Saturday it's a Big Ten game at noon or at 11 a.m. because nobody cares about the Eastern time zone.
Right.
So you have 11 a.m., the Big Ten game on Fox, 2:30, the Big Ten game on CBS. And then after that, then it comes filler stuff. FS1 will get a game or two. Who gets the rest of it? Will ESPN retain the rights to one or two games to fit in around that thing? I think that's probably the most likely scenario. The most interesting idea I've heard is going Fox with a Big Ten game at 11 a.m., CBS at 2:30, and then NBC coming in with a Big Ten primetime game. Now, if you tell me that having Big Ten games on broadcast networks all day long isn't going to draw attention, and oh, by the way, when on the next day on Sunday, throughout all that NFL programming, they're promoting the Big Ten game that's coming up on Saturday. There's no ignoring.
Okay.
There's no ignoring the Big Ten. Big Ten.
That's true, because if they could do that and then do it on Sunday, I mean, they're going to have to pay for the games. So they're going to have to market them and advertise them and talk about them.
These networks, they're going to spend a lot of money, i.e. $1 billion, to show Big Ten games. They're going to want people to watch these doggone games, and they're going to promote them and make sure you know about them. And so you're going to know the big game is on one of those networks.
Explain to people that having the Big Noon Saturday game is a big game, because I constantly see people on social media saying if we were a big deal, our games would be on at night. And it's kind of like, no, that's not true. The night games are fun, but in person, but the big game is Big Noon Saturday on Fox.
Fox's big time slot is Big Noon. With Fowler and Herb Street, Saturday night is the ABC primetime game. Okay, they've kind of locked into that. They try to send game day there because they don't want Herb Street having to fly across the country all the time. So Saturday night is going to be ABC's top game. CBS traditionally has had the big game at big SEC game at 2:30. So what's left? You have two choices. You could say Fox Big Noon and put it on 11 a.m., or you could do Fox College Football After Dark, like with the Pac-12. With the game at
that'd
10.
work well in November.
Yeah, it's like, so that's nothing. So Fox has glommed onto Big Noon, and they've had a lot of success for it, because that's where they decided. That's they could put their big game on there, and they were running up against the other. So the Fox's biggest game is going to be on 11 a.m. And to me, it isn't a question of if your team sucks, you're on 11 a.m. That's not the case. When your team sucks, your game is on BTN or ESPN News.
Okay. So. Next big question. You're talking about the Big Ten, the Big Ten splitting between Fox, CBS, and NBC. And between those networks, because they are broadcast networks, people could still pick those networks up on antennas.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I think that's a bigger deal than people think it is.
Just look at the ratings for the NCAA Final Four. When TBS carries the games, the rating, the viewership drops by a third. So many people have cut the cord and they either don't have cable, they don't want to spend the money on YouTube TV or some other online platform like that. So the games go, they just say, for one or two games, I'll just skip that. If I'm not thinking. But if the casual fan, one will bring in the big eyeballs, if you're a dedicated fan, will find a way to watch. Remember back in the day, we used to, how much did we pay on pay-per-views when in the Big 12 days? Husker fans will spend the money to watch it, but those people are going to do that. To attract people, you got to have those. Broadcast is really where it is right now. A lot of people will talk about, well, Amazon just got the NFL. The only reason Amazon got the NFL was because the big networks were losing money putting NFL football on Thursday nights.
Right.
It's like people are doing other stuff during the week. They were interested to a degree in Thursday night football, but Amazon just said, here's a crap ton of money, NFL, and NFL says, okay. We'll take it.
Okay. So three broadcast networks, three. That's
a possibility. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think it's almost certain that CBS is going to get their fingers in the mix. I think it's definitely going to be two. The question is whether it's three.
Okay, so if we have three broadcast networks doing Big Ten games, could this offset the obvious bias that the SEC gets in college football from ESPN?
Well, I think you'll see more ESPN bias, but the thing is that people know they have to, that they can't ignore Ohio State. They're going to be flipping over to watch those other things. At a certain point in time, Corso isn't going to be able to put the headgear on anymore.
Right.
And more people started liking what Fox was doing for their kickoff show. Back in the day when Urban Meyer was doing it, Urban's back on Fox more than likely. People were preferring, it was a little bit less gimmicky what Game Day had become. So
I think Game Day started just losing me when they did every week it's some celebrity picketer that you know what I mean? Bring in a guy that might be fun. I don't fucking Katy Perry. I love Katy Perry's music. I do, but I don't want to fucking see her pick football games. I don't. I just, some of that stuff, I turned it off.
I don't know when the last time I actually watched Game Day more than 15 minutes of Game Day thing. I mean, I got, I watch the games that are on, but it's like, I've got a full day of football here to watch. I don't need to, it's like I don't need to pregame. Game Day has almost become kind of a caricature of itself. So
I agree with that. It's way, I don't know. I think it's way overproduced. It's not. It's like what ESPN tries to do with everything, and what makes the NFL boring at times is it's just the constant absolute control of every moment of everything that ever happens, which is why Lee Corso was such a joy whenever he gaffed like that. What was the time he said fuck it and threw the headset off and picked up the other headset, and everybody was like, oh my God, that's fun. I think that's, Lee Corso can get away with that stuff, but I've covered events. I've been on the field where you were doing, when I was doing photography at ESPN events, well, like the College World Series, and it is heavily controlled by ESPN. And like you kind of understand that as a media person when you're going through the rules. And, for example, at the College World Series, you're not allowed to shoot any live video whatsoever. Even if you're up in the concourse, you're not allowed to shoot any live video during games at all. And the last time I was there, they basically sent out an email and said, we will tolerate no more live video shooting. If you do this again, your credentials will be revoked and you will be basically ejected from the College World Series. So some of that I understand, but some of it is just like, oh my God, the control stuff is just, I don't know, kind of boring.
But they're paying the money to have those.
They are paying the money.
So, so it's like I said, these sports aren't, college football isn't hurting for attention. It's not like MAC football. People are going to watch Big Ten football. And frankly, if it's on, if the game's on broadcast TV versus ESPNU,
right, that's a huge difference.
Find anyway. So,
oops. Do we have anything else to cover on Big Ten media rights?
No, I think so. Like I said, I really believe that I think you're going to see Fox has already basically signed and sealed and delivered. So Fox will have the big, and I shouldn't say guaranteed because I think it's all still up for negotiations, but Fox will have first cut of everything. I think it'll probably be CBS getting the second cut, and then the rest of it becomes FS1 and probably ESPN with something. The thing is, I think ESPN has to, what ESPN ABC currently have has to be pared down, simply because they just added one or two SEC games to the mix. So they just don't have the bandwidth. They joke about, we got bandwidth. Yeah, they're going to put they'll put a game that would have been on, everything gets bumped down a tier. So the game that was on ESPN2 is now going to be on ESPN News. So I don't think the Big Ten wants to do that. So I think they're going to, I think the money that CBS is going to be able to offer, because I think the CBS sees the value of being able to bring in brand names like Nebraska, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan is just too tough to ignore. So I think that's where.
Plus live sports. I mean,
live sports. You look at the top stuff that people watch on TV nowadays, it's live sports. It's gotten so fragmented. There's so many different, streaming options, whatever else. Any program, that's why network TV is all reality shows now, because nobody wants to produce something because there's only one type of program that will that you can get 10 million people to watch. That's a sporting event.
Yep. So that's where the money is. It comes down to, if we get $1 billion, if you and I get $1 billion a year. It comes down to about $71 million per school, which I think right now they get like what, 50?
Yeah, but keep in mind that 50 includes a bunch of other stuff too. That's the other thing, is because that 50, really only 30 billion of that 50, or 30 million of that 50 million comes from TV. The rest of it comes from like bowl revenue, the NCAA basketball tournament, the Big Ten basketball tournament, all these other things that make money for the Big Ten. It's not just football. I mean, other things make money for the Big Ten as well. And so when they get that big check for, all that money goes to the Big Ten, and then they write a big check out to every school, and that includes all that other stuff. So that's where it says, when they say, well, okay, if each school is going to get 70 to 75 million a year now from TV, then you add on top of that the college football playoff and bowl money, NCAA basketball tournament, all that stuff. that's when the number jumps over 100 million. And frankly, from my perspective, I hear the numbers, I see they always say the numbers always seem to reflect that the SEC is going to make more money, but the Big Ten's TV contract is going to be looks like it's going to pay more than the SEC. So I think it's not out of line that when this is all said and done, that the revenue that each Big Ten school is going to have available to it is going to approximately double. So that check is going to be probably in that $100 million range. Maybe it's 90, maybe it's 110. I don't know, but it.
So do you ever run into anybody that says, "Gee, I wish we'd never left the Big 12"?
Only when we got our ass handed to us by Ohio State. But I mean, when you look at this, the only people who say that are the people who don't follow it, or B, just look at the fact that Nebraska football has struggled the last 6-7 years. Nebraska football has been struggling the last 7 years, not because they left the Big Ten. They left because they made a really bad hire in 2015, and Scott Frost hasn't figured out how to dig us out of that hole.
Right. Okay, you think that's it?
I think that's it.
Anything else you want to cover or talk about?
I got to get back to work on opponent previews.
That's true. We have 11 more games to go. You put your Northwestern preview. I'm going to take the information from that and do a YouTube video. Start my opponent previews on YouTube. Okay. Let's see. I have to remember how Greg signs off.
Bye.
This has been the 5 Heart Podcast, because 5 hearts are the only hearts you need. Mike, this is where you say go Big Red.
Go Big Red.